Simon, the latest stats, do they show that we're on the right trajectory with VAR and that more technology is definitely the answer going forward? I know Danny Murphy and others might cringe when they hear that, but maybe not. The Premier League has now accepted there have been 6 game-changing wrong decisions by VAR officials, as well as 42 correct interventions in the first half of this season. That's according to data that they've collected. The 6 mistakes included goals being chalked off for Newcastle against Palace, Arsenal against Manchester United, and West Ham against Chelsea. There have also been a similar number of incidents when VAR should have intervened but didn't do so. However, the Premier League will make a decision in January as to whether or not to introduce semi-automated automated offsides, and that was the system you and I saw being used in the World Cup.
So are we saying there's a similar number of incidents that we've got 48 interventions, 42 have been correct, 6 have been wrong, and there's another 48 that potentially VAR should have got involved in?
No. What we're saying, that another 6 they could have gotten involved in. As few as 6. As few as 6. Right. So, I mean...
Well, it's undeniable then, isn't it?
By and large, the damn thing has worked.
Well, it's undeniable. If you've got 54 events, of which 48 were reported upon, and 1 in 7 of them, or 1 in 8 of them, has gone the way it should have gone, in terms of an VAR intervention that's produced an outcome that would have otherwise not been there if a referee had been left on his own, then it is compelling. Now, whether you can bridge the gap between 42 and 48 and suggest that we get to a point where 48 out of 48 situations manifest themselves, I don't think you can. I don't think you can ever get to a point in any walk of life where you've got a zero COVID policy, you've got no downtime on internet, you've got anything that's absolutely 100% or 0% based upon the parameters you're judging it by. So when we say, I mean, it's surprisingly low numbers given the amount of games that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
It surprises me that actually when we talk about this awful concept that VAR is, that we've only got 48, including 6 that were missed, 54 potential VAR interventions over X amount of games during X amount of time. I don't know how many games it is, but it's got to be somewhere in the region of 150, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're talking about 1 intervention in every 3 games by that rule. Yeah. So it's not this awful, all-consuming, debilitating concept that we've envisaged in the first place. We also saw some of the situations in the World Cup that would demand an evolution and an increase in technology, as in the goal that was given in terms of the, was it the South Koreans, where the ball went over the line.
Or Japanese.
Japanese didn't go over the line. And there was a call for VAR being on the dead ball between the goal line and the corner flag.
Yeah.
So with that in mind...
Japanese against Spain. I've
never been in a situation where I felt the correct deployment of VAR was ever going to be a threat to the game. But the key terminology there is the correct deployment of it, because VAR was brought in as not an aid memoir, but as a facilitation to a solution that referees were constantly being judged by, which is this 360-degree, 24 hours a day, 7-day a week scrutiny that every decision is put under. And I've always felt that it was incumbent upon the referee to call for VAR than the other way round.
But even after the mega scrutiny, and you're right about that, it's intense these days. Once we get to the eventual decision, for God's sake, everybody accept it. Accept it.
Well,
because it's been scrutinised to the nth
but then
degree.
then potentially you're negating a whole industry, aren't you, by suggesting that punditry becomes less prevalent and broadcasters have less time. Oh, I know.
They'll all call it out.
Maybe,
the doubters.
But the point is it now becomes the challenge is how loud are the challenges? How important are people dissenting against it? And how does it knock it off its course? And is the game being worsened or bettered by the introduction of VAR? The background noise of who doesn't like it, whether Alan Shearer has something to say or XYZ person has something to say about VAR. The problem with life at this moment in time sometimes is sentiment overrides fact. But in the end, fact will always trump sentiment, right? In this instance, fact says that we have seen 42 more correct decisions in football matches than we would have seen if it wasn't there.
Right.
And we've lost 6 or maybe possibly 12 situations where VAR could and should have done its job better.
Correct.
And it's at 6 and 12 that we need to work on a little bit. 6 of decisions that were missed.
Yeah.
Because that's inexcusable, quite frankly.
Yeah.
If you're going to get, that's 10% of decisions. 10% of the decision. That's a higher margin of error that should be tolerated, and they should be bridging that gap. And I want to focus on the positives, but you also have to look at where the thing breaks. And if you've got 6 interventions that didn't happen, and that's 10%, slightly more than 10% of the interventions that VAR has been involved in, good and bad, and not, then you have to turn around and say, That's a statistic that should be focused on. But the real statistic is 42 correct interventions.
You know, this decision that the Premier League have got to make in January on whether or not to introduce semi-automated offsides, a system that was used, you and I saw it in the World Cup in Qatar, and it's been used in the Champions League, automatically detects when a player is offside. That's as near as perfection as you'll get. Well, because we've just come through a World Cup where it was a goals avalanche, and not one of them was subject to a dodgy offside. I think I'm correct in that. I don't think we saw one contestable offside decision.
I mean, it is not beyond a wit of man using artificial intelligence and also the dynamics of using technology on players and balls to be able to achieve an outcome which is near to perfection as you can get.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. Yeah. I don't think we're turning it into Tron. I don't think this is football by Intel.
I don't think so.
I think this is simply using... I've always maintained... I remember writing an article 17 years ago in The Observer about this quaint notion that it was jumpers for goalposts and that every other sport was advancing technology. And there is this resistance, and we heard it in Luke Gregg's speech earlier on about Headway, about the resistance in football to move things along.
Yeah.
And it isn't just about the idea that people don't want to move. It's about the fact that people don't think about the solutions and how it's going to advance the game. Losing games because of refereeing ineffectiveness, or losing games because we won't embrace technology, is not really something we should want to embrace. And at the same time, we should try to find a methodology, and are beginning to do that, where the interaction between the digital face of football refereeing and the actual spontaneity of the game becomes seamless. Yeah, that's the vision that we want.
Sure. The stats are incredible, Simon. Really. 42 correct interventions in the first half of the season.
But that's not going to stop talking heads on television programmes turning around and taking out an individual. Because then that's what you do with people. And that's what very few people do. And every now and again, we do it quite well on the show, which is why some people like us. Because that don't bear out. Hang on. Put that argument forward again. Yeah. Right, so you're telling me VAR is a force for no good whatsoever. When you've got 42 or 80, 90% of the decisions that I've made have advanced the game in the correct direction, how do you argue against it? And what you'll get back is, because I do. Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not an argument.
Never wanted it and it should be scrapped.
And that's it.
Still come away with
and I think VAR, in its second or third incarnation, which is probably VAR 3.0 now, by the time it gets to its fifth incarnation, should be as seamless to the transaction that is football, in terms of spontaneity, outcomes, correct decisions, and value added as it can be.
What about all the time that was added on the World Cup? You don't want to see that, do you?
Yeah, I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. Why not? Because I think ultimately this nonsense of people, I want to see protocols being enforced properly. I am sick to the back teeth of rules being adapted. When a player goes down for a head injury, stop the game. When a player goes down because he's tripped over his own feet, why have we got to be stopping the game? I want to see people having the game enforced. I want people to be able to see more time in play. When you start seeing the game having 50 minutes in play and the other 40 minutes somewhere else in the stadium, that's really not quite the value that we want.
Yeah.
And of course, if it means time wasting is going to put 15 minutes on, I realise that fans are going to say, I can't get my train, I can't get this, I can't get that. But players are going to be on a pitch for an extra 20 minutes in a game and they ain't going to like that. So they'll soon change their attitude.
Yeah, the World Cup, though, it did drag on. I mean, Simon, Premier League matches this season have been 3 minutes shorter on average than those that we saw in the World Cup in Qatar. 98 minutes, 55 seconds compared to 101 minutes, 34 seconds. Yeah. I mean, there were times in the World Cup, I was saying to you, 11 minutes what are we seeing?
Well, I mean, that will come down to the game policing itself. If these players and these managers want to be on the pitch for 110 minutes a game, then carry on as you are. Carry on rolling around, wasting time, doing whatever it is you take to get to a position where the referee feels the need to stop the clock to be able to add it onto the back end. Yeah. And you will soon work out that's not something you want to do.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.